It sits under the very muted umbrella of chromophobia, which is the fear and aversion of colors. For example, sufferers of melanophobia are afraid of the color black. For porphyrophobia, purple is their primary fear, and in cases of leukophobia, white just ain't right. In their most aggressive forms, just saying the names of these colors can be enough to trigger full-blown panic attacks. But why can a single color cause such an immobilizing reaction? Like many phobias, these can often be traced back to specific traumatic events. A sufferer might have been in an accident with a yellow car, for example, and unconsciously associated their intense fear of the situation with that color. Or sometimes intense colors can induce painful migraines, so sufferers go out of their way to avoid them entirely. Man, I don't want to know what happens if these poor people look up at a rainbow. Terrifying pterophobia. Is there anything more delicious than pizza topped with mouth-watering amounts of hot, stringy cheese? Just the thought of it is making my stomach rumble, although for anyone with pterophobia, this is guaranteed to make their stomach churn. It's not a fear of pizza, thank God, but a fear of cheese, which is so much worse. As blasphemous as it sounds, plenty of people simply don't like cheese because of its flavor, smell, or even texture. But pterophobia is an abject fear of all or some of these cheesy features, which usually stems from some kind of trauma. Like being really sick after eating some, or even choking on a piece. It can be so upsetting that sufferers choose to avoid these delicious dairy products altogether. And by avoiding it, their harrowing experience gradually curdles into intense disgust or fear. I guess you could say they just camembert it. Hopefully they're not afraid of cheesy jokes as well. Difficult decidophobia. What are you going to have for lunch tomorrow? Are you going to take out the trash before then? Or will you clean up your room first? These are basic questions, but if you felt anxious at the thought of making any of those choices, you might suffer from a degree of decidophobia. As you can probably guess by the name, that's the fear of making decisions. Now, you're always making choices, from what you eat, to what you wear, and how you act. You do it so often in fact, that the average person makes about 35,000 conscious decisions a day. Assuming you sleep for about 8 hours, that's at least 36 decisions a minute. So, depending on how aggressive a person's decidophobia is, chronic sufferers can be paralyzed by their fear every minute of every day. But what could be the root cause of this debilitating phobia? Well, it's most commonly associated with a perfectionist thinking style, meaning making any kind of mistake can make them feel incredibly anxious. However, being afraid to make the wrong decision can turn into being too scared to make any decisions at all. What a terrifying paradox. Problematic papyrophobia. Paper isn't exactly man's worst enemy, but paper cuts definitely are. Those teeny tiny incisions hurt so much, so you can almost understand why papyrophobia, also known as the irrational fear of paper, exists. The term stems from the ancient Egyptians, who used papyrus to make a crude type of paper. But not every papyrophobe fears paper in the same way. Some fear the texture of dry paper, while others despise slushy, wet paper, purely blank paper, or even just the sound of ripping paper. And as weird as that seems, it's not as uncommon as you think. Actress Megan Fox revealed she loathes touching dry paper. So, she requests all her scripts be laminated, or instead, she neurotically wets her fingers as she flips through the pages. Obviously, this fear can be pretty debilitating, seeing as we're faced with books, letters, and receipts on a near-daily basis. Fortunately, treatment is available in the form of learning coping skills, called cognitive behavioral therapy, such gradual desensitization, and anti-anxiety medication. And maybe use of an e-reader. Veritable vestophobia. Is there anything worse than putting on your favorite clothes and suddenly realizing they're too tight? While it can serve as a reminder to start that dreaded diet for some, for others, tight clothing can spark an all-out anxiety attack. And in the worst cases, even baggy clothing can make people feel afraid. This condition is known as vestophobia, not a fear of vests, but a fear of clothing. It's thought to stem from claustrophobia, the fear of confined spaces, because tight clothing is a common trigger for vestophobes. While we all know clothing isn't dangerous, it can link back to a traumatic event involving clothing or fabric, where the individual felt trapped or struggled to breathe.